what do we know in this first year in Portugal of application of the GDPR? So we would like to share some quick facts with you. We have more reactive data subjects because data subjects are more aware of their rights, data protection rules, so they are more reactive. They present more complaints. We have an increasement of complaints that have been presented before the Portuguese DPA over the past year. We have different level playing field in what concerns the application and in the implementation of the GDPR in Portugal. So we have large companies that have made a huge investment implementing GDPR, and we have small and medium enterprises as well as public sector that are now implementing GDPR. This will be an item that I will focus later on. Another fact related to this is the costs of implementation of GDPR. Actually, the Portuguese government has carried out an assessment regarding the costs of implementation of GDPR in Portugal. And they came to a conclusion that the annual costs of GDPR implementation was 170 million euros. This is made in the majority related to the private sector because, as I mentioned, the public sector is now beginning to implement GDPR. And why? Because the local law, and I will cover this later on, the local law establish an exemption for the public sector and an exemption of fines. So this is one of the reasons why the public sector is now waking up for this subject. Another fact is that the majority of the companies have appointed a data protection officer, even though in some cases they are not obliged to appoint a DPO. For governance reasons, they have decided to appoint this DPO. Usually it is an internal resource that deals with these data protection issues as a DPO. So this is another quick fact. And what has been the activity of the Portuguese Data Protection Authority? An average, this authority has carried out an average of 1 investigation per day. This is not an investigation, all investigations are not on premises. It can be send of clarification requests to the companies or ask for proof of consent, proof of transparency, compliance, but 1 investigation per day. 274 data breaches have been reported to the Portuguese DPA. Of course, this number, when compared with the 89,000 of Europe, it's very low number. But well, for the Portuguese context, it's quite a lot because I think that companies decide to notify the data breach, even because sometimes they are not sure if the data breach is to be reportable, but since the fine that may be applied in case of non-compliance with this obligation is quite high, they decide to notify this data breach. Usually following this notification of data breach, the Portuguese DPA asks for some clarifications, or in some cases, actually, it has conducted some investigations, local investigations to these companies. The DPA has initiated in this past year 864 formal proceedings and issued 6 fines. Actually, the Portuguese DPA was one of the first authorities to issue a fine after 25th of May, and this fine was applied to a public hospital due to non-compliance with security reasons, organizational measures, and the other 5 fines were related to lack of consent, lack of transparency. So these are the main focus of the Portuguese DPA.